Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to WCA's February 2026 second Saturday session. Today's presentation is Cultivating Care for Black Mothers, a panel exploring the intersection of art and healthcare. My name is Laura Morrison. I am the programming chair for WCA. I'd like to welcome the WCA's 2022 Emerging Artist Awardee, Ashley January, along with Dr. Alexandria Cunningham and Melissa Parram from Planned Parenthood of Illinois, who are here to discuss maternal and infant mortality in the wake of Roe versus Wade's reversal. The panel will be discussing how the current political climate impacts healthcare research and access, and how art, advocacy, and activism can help cultivate care for mothers at every level. I'd like to introduce everyone on the panel, starting with Ashley January. So Ashley January creates contemporary paintings informed by her maternal experience, exploring themes of preeclampsia, premature birth, and birth trauma. Her newest body of work continues to address the Black maternal mortality and morbidity crisis in America. Ashley became the first recipient of the Women's Caucus for Art 2022 Emerging Artist Award and has recently debuted her newest series, Environments of a Heavy Joy, at Expo Chicago 2025 and 1-54 Contemporary American Art Fair 2024 in London with the Cynthia Corbett Gallery. She had the second installment of her solo exhibition, Human Mother Black, at Western Illinois University. Hello, Ashley.
Hello.
I'd like to introduce next Dr. Alexandria Cunningham. Dr. Alexandria Cunningham is an independent scholar and curator and sexual well-being professional. She holds a PhD in African and African diaspora studies with a portfolio in women's and gender studies from the University of Texas at Austin. Notably, she has been a John Money Fellow for Scholars of Sexology at the Kinsey Institute and is currently a visiting scholar at the Leather Archives and Museum. Dr. Cunningham is often consulting, teaching, and writing, bridging gaps between social identities, experience, and accessibility with community organizations and arts and cultural institutions. Some of her social impact work includes Black LGBTQIA+ viability, pleasure-based sex education, holistic wellness, and culturally concordant healthcare. Next, welcome. Melissa Parram. Ms. Melissa Parram is an experienced healthcare professional with over 20 years of experience in clinic operations, patient management, and staff development. She's a dedicated patient advocate with a strong background in clinic supervision, practice, and case management, who ensures smooth transitions for prenatal services. As the certified prenatal care case manager at Planned Parenthood of Illinois, she develops partnerships with external healthcare organizations and provides comprehensive prenatal care support. Melissa's goal is to foster trust and respect, empower patients to actively participate in their care, and create a supportive environment that promotes positivity and dignity. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, Melissa. So at this point, I would like to turn the meeting and the presentation over to Ashley. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to hear more about your work and everything that is going on.
Thank you, Laura. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for having us and hosting us with Women's Caucus for Art. We're so happy to be here. Thank you to my panelists, Dr. Cunningham and Melissa. Thank you for being here with me on Valentine's Day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in my new space. It is a new branch of my art practice as a whole. It's part working studio and part arts incubator, where we are going to be showcasing exhibitions of local artists here in the Beverly neighborhood. And we're hosting programs like the panel today. Last year, we were able to host the Baby Roland Foundation for their annual diaper drive. So we're really trying to create more community outreach with the space and kind of deliver more awareness on social justice issues. So I'm really happy that we could host this talk today. I'm going to get started by talking about the current series that's displayed here in the space, starting with the first painting. So the title of this body of work is Environments of a Heavy Joy. And it's the second iteration of my investigation into exploring the Black maternal mortality and morbidity crisis. The first series was titled Human Mother Black, and so now this is kind of like the second chapter. And the first painting in the series is titled Nina and Pia, which is right behind me in the space. And it is a work that depicts a daughter and mother together in this landscape. I have the privilege of taking all my own photographs, doing photo shoots with families that participate in my project. And I ask them to take me to places where they find healing and joy and peace and serenity together. And Nina and Pia are close family friends of ours that grew up around the corner from us. And they took me to a nearby lake in their home. And we had a chance to take some photographs in the park and ended up under a willow tree, which I think is kind of apropos to the feelings that we are discussing when thinking about the barriers that are experienced in America by Black families, the disparities of just feeling like you're not being listened to and heard when you are just trying to give birth. And so Pia unfortunately experienced preeclampsia in her pregnancy over 30 years ago, and that is hypertension during pregnancy. Her daughter Nina was born prematurely and had to recover in the NICU. But today it's a story of perseverance, and Nina is thriving and doing well. She is happy, and Pia is also doing well. And during the photo shoot, they were together and you could feel the bond that they had. So in the painting, I really tried to capture that. They're standing close to each other, but not quite together, but very, very close to each other. So you can feel that connection. Nina is kind of peering out. She's not facing the audience. She's peering out onto the lake, kind of reiterating this idea of reflection with a larger body of water. She is the future. She has persevered through a very kind of traumatic beginning with being born prematurely, but now is a successful young person who also wants to help to advocate so that future families don't have to experience some of the complications, that they unfortunately experience. You'll notice that they're standing on kind of like a wavering ground foundation that's a little precarious. I try to render some of that unsettled feeling. They're standing barefoot on this foundation, and that also symbolizes some of the barriers that they face within the healthcare system. The next work is titled Bodily Autonomy, and it was also derived from the photo references that I took from the photo shoot. And again, it's a continuation of this conversation of, wanting to be in control of the situation, feeling like you are controlled, like you have no control. Unfortunately, there is an article that came out recently in The Guardian highlighting how Black women have to advocate for themselves in the healthcare system because oftentimes they're not trusted, they're ignored, they're kind of brushed off with their symptoms, they're not really believed. And, in the article, it mentioned this one young woman who felt like she felt like she was a lawyer. She had to kind of make her case that her symptoms were real and try to explain that, no, this is what's going on with me. Please listen, please help. And so in Pia's case, she had preeclampsia. She knew something was wrong with her. She could feel it in her body. And during the interview, I often pulled titles, sometimes from the interviews. She mentioned that she was grateful that she listened to herself, that she advocated for herself because she knew something was wrong. And because of that advocacy that she did, she was able to survive and she was able to save her daughter that was born, Nina. So again, I'm thinking about this reflection of these experiences, them standing on this kind of precarious ground and foundation is what I try to convey in this invented landscape that they're in. The next work in this space is of Jatan, and it's a portrait. In this series, Environments of a Heavy Joy, I was able to interview different families. So Nina and Pia were a family that I had a chance to interview in the first series, and in the second series, Jatan and her husband Owen were another family, the Roland family. And in the series, I like to create smaller portraits that really kind of zoom in on the individual that is speaking, because we also conduct interviews during the photo shoots where I get to ask them questions about their experiences. They get to talk about almost like a personal testimony of what they had to go through, how it has affected their family, and what they experience after the fact. And so I pair the portraits with the audio installation so that audiences can walk through and listen to their stories told directly by them in their own voices. So in this space, she is actually placed next to her husband, Owen. And another part of the conversation that I wanted to address is this broader issue of kind of neglecting the partners or husbands in the family who also experience this heavy trauma. Having to bear witness that to their wives or partners, birthing person, going through this physical, complicated, challenging scenario within the healthcare system, whether it be emergency C-section, whether it be other complications, bleeding or what have you, etc. Having to bear witness to that, having to be the support system, the rock, after going through that and kind of holding the family together, then being able to voice their experiences, I felt was necessary in the second iteration. And so I had a chance to interview Owen in the series and listen to his recount of the situation, the trauma that they all experienced as a family, and their unfortunate passing of their son. So they unfortunately experienced infant loss. And I had the privilege of meeting them through the March of Dimes organization, which is another nonprofit that helps bring awareness to maternal and infant health. And so the next slide, you'll see them kind of positioned on the wall in conversation with each other, which I think is really important because you see that bond again, and audiences get to walk through the space and listen to the stories told directly by them. So in the photo shoots, in the next slide, there we were able to walk through, again, another outdoor space that was adjacent to their home. And they live in the city. And, it's this reoccurring theme of being in nature as a healing space, finding it peaceful and allowing themselves to kind of cope with the trauma that they've experienced and trying to capture those moments. And in this particular piece, Just to Be There, that title was pulled from Owen during the interview when he was remembering the circumstance of his wife, just recently losing their son, and how he just wanted to be her support. He just wanted to be there for her. So that was pulled from part of that interview. And you'll notice in the composition, they're kind of anchored on the outside of their daughter. There's a barrier in between the viewer and their daughter, Olivia, but she is engaging the audience. The spaces are meant to be protected spaces, safe spaces, but they are also meant to engage audiences and invite them to be a part of this broader conversation. So the next slide is a postpartum seesaw, which is continuing this conversation of them being in this protected environment, this place of joy together. And you'll notice that Owen is almost, kind of cropped off to the side in the composition. And that is intentional because it symbolizes this overarching theme of the partners and husbands not necessarily being included in this conversation, but how important they are and how important it is to think of the Black maternal health crisis as a family crisis, the Black community crisis, that because it impacts everyone that is in the family. And they're having a moment of joy and kind of peace. And the next slide, in memory of baby Roland, that title was also pulled from an interview I had with Jatan as she kind of thinks back to the time when she was able to get pregnant again. Part of her message that she wants to give families is that you are not alone. She mentioned that going through infant loss was something so new to her. She didn't know anybody who had gone through that. And she felt like, it was a situation that just, often never really happened, but unfortunately it does happen more often than people realize. And so she wants families to feel like there are resources out there. There are ways to heal. There are ways to, continue to move forward in life. And so they started the Baby Roland Foundation in memory of their son. And so this painting is for that memory. And another thing she mentioned is she felt like during her pregnancy with Olivia, her son was kind of looking down on the pregnancy and kind of guiding it and protecting the pregnancy, because she ended up having 0 complications with Olivia during that second pregnancy. And you'll also notice that they're wearing, the parents are wearing black, green, and red, which kind of symbolizes the Black liberation flag. And often I'll paint the children wearing red, white, and blue. So we're having this conversation about these disproportionate things happening to the Black community in the United States of America. The next slide is of Kaylin and Kendra, which is another family I was able to incorporate into this series. And Kendra and her wife, Kelly, brought another layer to speaking to these issues. They, being a queer couple, and unfortunately at the time, there was no law that permitted legal gay marriage. And so they were domestic partners, and having to kind of navigate that layer of being domesticated, partners in the healthcare space, how they were treated by healthcare professionals, maybe not being, allowed into the room at the time she was about to deliver. And Kendra ended up developing complications with Kaylin and had to make, some immediate decisions. And I think at the end, after Kaylin was born, Kelly had to legally adopt her daughter, even though they were all on her insurance plan. So shedding light on those other barriers is also a part of this broader conversation of how, policy impacts Black maternal health and the family. And in this composition in particular, it's an invented space, a landscape again, where I'm thinking about, nature and kind of making it through the storm. I'm always fascinated by clouds and, sunsets and just nature in general. And I've been recently kind of investigating more of forest baths, which originated in, I think, Japanese, which I think has been around for a while, but the term is coined Shinrin-yoku, which is a forest bath, where they actually created forest therapy and found that just taking hikes, walking through nature, provided a healing component for the body and lowered cortisol levels and, the stress hormone. And so I found it interesting that one of the through lines is being out in nature as a way of healing and coping to process the trauma that they've gone through. So thinking about that. And then next slide, I'm also creating studies throughout the series, and I'm always photographing nature, and that gathering that source material helps to inform compositions in the future. So this is one of the just studies that I created throughout the series. In the next slide, I also like to do some self-reflection. about my own experience. The first series, Human Mother Black, really started with this investigation of the self in my process. I knew I wanted to document the entire metamorphosis of the body throughout pregnancy. And so I was always taking photos and sketching and drawing. And this painting in particular derives from a photograph that I took of myself right before I had to go in for that last kind of checkup in the hospital at 32 weeks and 4 days. It was supposed to be kind of a routine checkup of the fetal heartbeat monitoring, ended up being an emergency, and I had no idea. So I was documenting my process and was able to capture this one last photograph of the body in my own space, privately, isolated. Sorry, I got a little bit of ambulance going by. Just give me 1 second. It's a space for the community, so there's a lot of action around here sometimes. So just getting back to the painting, this was based off of a photograph that I took of the body the last moments before I went in for that last checkup by myself privately. And I wanted to, you'll notice that parts of the figure are kind of left, not fully rendered out with that first pass, like the shoulder and the collarbone, the face, the hands, and the camera. Those are all rendered out with that first pass. But then there's kind of this initial transparent layer of application that I'm really interested in preserving and allowing the audience to kind of move through the painting and see how the paint is applied. So there's some impasto texture also to the painting. And I'm also playing with a little bit of the confrontation. So even though the photo reference is based off of the figure taking a self-portrait, the way that she is kind of holding the phone, which is also a device that kind of signifies this contemporary modern time of the iPhone. You're not sure if she's taking a photo of herself, if she's taking a photo of you, if she is watching you watch her. So that kind of confrontation I'm playing with the viewer, and also speaking to a broader issue of the body being kind of interrogated when in the exterior space. So moving through the world, oftentimes there are comments that are not necessarily welcome based on how big you are. And that's part of, my experience. And I know there are other birthing people who have similar experience, and just being hyper aware of that change and how it is perceived by the outside world, as well as something that I'm playing with, and that kind of psychological component to it. So in the next slide, there are more studies painted of stemming from the photo references that were taken at that 32 weeks and 4 days. And you'll see on the right side, there's kind of an outline of that mirror, and it's kind of reflecting back and forth at inverse. So playing with reflection. And next slide. Continuing this conversation of my own journey into the healthcare system and how I felt moving through that and navigating that. I knew before I got pregnant that there was a Black maternal health crisis, but it doesn't quite hit you the same until you go through it. And I knew that I needed to advocate for myself in the hospital setting. And I had a talk with my husband. Look, I'm going to need you to make sure that you are aware of everything happening around me. If there's something that happens, make sure you speak up and say something. At one point, when speaking with my OB-GYN before I got pregnant, I mentioned that I thought about getting a doula, but she talked me out of it because she thought that they didn't have enough education. And so that could have been another resource that I was talked out of from my own provider, that I look back and I wish perhaps I should have, trusted my instinct more. But in this scenario, in triage, it's fine. When I went in for that checkup, the nurse just had a feeling based on the fetal heartbeat monitoring that something was wrong, and she just wanted to keep me just to observe, just in case. So at that point, I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to be going home soon. I'm just going to, maybe a little bit of bed rest, but it'll be okay. And I'm kind of in this blissful state. I'm almost ignorant, I feel like. And the way that I'm kind of positioning my thumb, I'm actually holding another monitor. And every time I feel a kick, I'm supposed to press the button. But the way that my husband took the photo reference, it looks like I'm kind of giving a thumbs up and I have a smile on my face, which kind of alludes to this idea of being in this ignorant state and everyone around you in the healthcare setting kind of knowing that things are not necessarily progressing in the best way, but not really revealing that to you and not being as transparent. So feeling like, you are not in control of the situation and people around you know the urgency, but you are unaware of it. That's what I was trying to depict with this small work, and how that issue within our healthcare system needs to be something that we, work on. I think patients should have full knowledge and disclosure of the kind of state that they're in, and perhaps should be prepared to experience a scenario where it doesn't necessarily go as planned, so that they can, prepare themselves a little bit better. So within less than 48 hours, I was rushed to the OR and had to have an emergency C-section. The only cure for preeclampsia is delivery. So I did not know that at the time, but that was the day the photo reference was based off that I was diagnosed with preeclampsia. Mm-hmm. So in the next slide, I also have a mini triptych that I made, which was more of a cathartic experience for me, where I am portraying my son while he's in the NICU. Again, I documented the entire process that I went through, the journey. And this was based off of a photo reference I took of my husband holding our son. And you'll notice on the ground, I'm playing with materials. I actually kind of painted out the name Kyle, which is his name, underneath as kind of the ground, the base layer. And on top of that, I rendered out the forms. And the next slide, a part of the triptych, this is based off a photo reference I took of my son actually in the incubator. And it's a little bit of a play on words, but in the incubator, but it's heavier. And, at the time I was just really reflecting on how I really wanted him to stay in the womb for as long as possible. And I almost felt like a failure because my body wasn't able to carry him for as long as he needed to be to provide that source of nutrients that he needed. So thinking about that, and you'll notice underneath the ground is also painted with Ashley. So he's painted on top of my name. Mm-hmm. The next slide, again, I've painted out the name Ashley and then the rendering of the figure is on top, and he's kind of holding his hands up a little bit. And that one stood out to me as a photo reference because he was a fighter in the NICU and ended up pulling out his feeding tube at one point because he just wanted to feed on his own. He was just a very strong little baby, and I wanted to convey that. And so this triptych is kind of a tribute to him. In this last work in the series, Preeclampsia, Postpartum in NICU, this is an invented space that is based on multiple photo references that I use. And the photo reference of my son was when he was a baby, still in the NICU, but the photo references used to paint the self are actually taken years later. And so it's still this constant reflection. This painting was made in 2024. My son at the time of me painting this was 6 years old. So, again, this idea that going through this trauma, there is a healing, there's a coping that is constant. But the awareness of that trauma kind of stays with you, I think, for the rest of your life. And the preeclampsia, I was diagnosed with severe preeclampsia, which means that I have to be aware of my risk factors for the rest of my life. I'm more prone to developing heart disease, stroke, anything related to the heart and blood pressure. So for a while, for months after giving birth, I had to log my blood pressure to make sure that it was in the normal range. And so that is another thing that I always have to be aware of. And so sometimes I feel like people who, or at least within my experience, having the diagnosis of this condition, even though I'm fine now, but there are people who do experience preeclampsia and are on medication for the rest of their life. Always being aware and kind of tethered to making sure I'm okay, making sure I'm healthy, taking care of myself, even more so because I'm prone to, these other adverse conditions later on in my life. So that tethering, you'll see she's connected to the blood pressure machine and kind of propped off on the side. So thinking about those different elements within this work. And the next slide shows one of the last works that was commissioned, a dance performance. So I consider myself to be a painter, but also a multidisciplinary artist, which means that I like to incorporate more of a holistic kind of broader conversation, really speaking to the work and, having this conversation in a wide way, I guess. And so bringing the elements of dance into the series felt very natural as another means of communication. The movement, I commissioned Nia and her partner Benjamin to create and choreograph dance that was in response to conversations we had about this series and the subject matter of Black maternal mortality and morbidity. And one interesting thing is she's actually performing the dance when we filmed it pregnant, which was very coincidental. I think not. I think it was meant to happen. So that was, just a beautiful dance that was created titled Healing Landscape. And these are just some still frames from the digital film that was created.
So that concludes my presentation of the works in the space. And now we're going to open it up to the panel discussion with Dr. Cunningham and Melissa.
I just first want to take a moment to say, Ashley, you're absolutely amazing. The work you did is really striking, like really powerful. It has something to say, but it's also really emotional. So thank you for that. And I'm grateful to have you here, Melissa, you as well, who is our certified case manager for our registered prenatal care program at Parenthood of Illinois. And you can speak to patient education, advocacy, and what comprehensive prenatal care looks like. We'll get to that. And as our moderator, but also our Black Organizing Program fellow, I can speak to some of our advocacy work here in Illinois, awareness building efforts, and the Black maternal health community partnerships that we have. But I want to take a quick moment to kind of explain where we are with Black maternal health. In 2016, Black Moms Matter Alliance actually founded Black Maternal Health Week, which is an annual commemoration from April 11th to 17th to build awareness, community, and activism to address the high rates of pregnancy-related deaths among Black women in the United States. It boosts advocacy for reproductive justice, improved maternal health outcomes, and policy that centers the experiences of Black birthing people. And this year is actually the 10th anniversary, and the theme is rooted in justice, joy. Ashley, I want to begin with you. As I said, your artwork is beautiful and deeply personal. It's an investigation of pregnancy and postpartum that's layered with so much meaning and potential to create new stories. One thing I find particularly provocative is how you title each piece, like Postpartum Seesaw, In Memory of Baby Roland, and your self-portraits in Triage of Time or Bun in the Incubator. Can you talk a bit about your research process and specifically how that care work allows you to aptly name people's experiences?
Yeah, so as I shared in the presentation, part of my research is the interviews that I have with the families. I get to sit down with them and ask them questions. They get to tell me their personal experiences and personal testimonies of, the complications, adverse outcomes that they experience together. And really here, I sit down individually with the mother for the person and their partner separately to get, two different recounts of the situation, how it has impacted them. And that that informs a lot of how I portray them on the canvas. Another part of the research is just reading a lot. So I mentioned, an article that came out in the Guardian addressing these issues of advocacy that Black women face in the healthcare system. And it feels like nowadays there's an article every week about Black maternal health and morbidity and how it impacts the Black community. So I'm constantly staying up to date on current events and how it is impacting, this issue in this country. Alongside that, there are, some books that I read. I go to exhibitions. I try to look to other artists who have investigated motherhood, like Elizabeth Catlett or Frida Kahlo. She was actually interested in doing part of what she had lots of complications that didn't allow her to. So I look to other figures that inspire, the work that I'm doing. But the families are my biggest influence in the research, and really getting to know them and sitting down with them and listening to everything that they have to say about their experience. I think bringing, shedding light and highlighting them is the foremost thing, along with allowing myself to do a reflection of my own experience of really understanding what happened. There was a lot of research that went into preeclampsia after the fact. Unfortunately, with my own doctor, there wasn't a lot of explanation as to what happened after. There were a lot of answers, questions that I had that she couldn't provide answers to or didn't have the time. And so I wanted to understand how could it happen, because a lot of the times there is this blame of oneself. There's this guilt that you feel because you feel like your body didn't perform the way it was. It could not create this nurturing environment for the amount of time it was supposed to. Why did that happen? I consider myself to be a healthy person. I try to eat organic foods and 12% I took Pilates classes and everything to try to make sure my environment provided my child what he needed. And unfortunately, it still did not, the outcomes were not what I thought they were. And so trying to understand that is a constant research project. And, I turned to websites like the CDC to get statistic information. So yeah, that's part of my research project.
And absolutely a holistic research process.
Yes.
And it's a lot to take in that information. So Melissa, I want to turn to you and want to name how much incredible work you do with our patients through Parenthood of Illinois, but also in the community around patient advocacy and your expertise in developing community partnerships and putting people in a position to better access information. Because to Ashley's point, right, you have all of these follow-up questions. What happened? What's wrong with me? And finding ways to help people release some of that blame, some of that self-doubt is really important. You do it fabulously. So can you give us an overview of the Bridges program for folks who aren't familiar, and share how you approach care and clinical operations, patient education, and advocacy?
Absolutely. So the Bridges to Prenatal Care program was launched back in April of 2022 during Black Maternal Health Week. So just to go previously before that and to give you a little bit of history. So we at Planned Parenthood, we offer our patients what we call as an early pregnancy assessment appointment. So prior to the Bridges program, patients would come in for early pregnancy assessment
which consists of getting a pregnancy test and a dating ultrasound to see how far they are. So if the patient wanted to continue their pregnancy prior to the Bridges program, they were given like a packet of resources and providers and sent on their way. Mm-hmm. So looking at the data and where our health centers were located, there are a lot of maternal health deserts, especially in the south side of Chicago and also in the south suburbs. So the Bridges program was launched in the south side, west side, and in the south suburbs. So basically, the Bridges program, the patients, after they receive their early pregnancy assessment appointment, they are added to our program. So basically, they can get free prenatal visits, which consist of early labs, and the certified nurse midwife, Leslie Moore Hicks, who is amazing. She's also the director of the program as well. So they're seen by the nurse midwife for the medical aspect of it. And then me as the case manager, I connect them with the holistic part. So looking at their needs, looking if they need medical insurance, mental health resources, housing, transportation, with food, getting them connected with those particular resources, and then also connecting them with an OB provider where they can continue their pregnancy journey. And it's amazing because a lot of our patients who are first-time parents, and a lot of them really don't know what prenatal care is. And it's surprising, but a lot of people just don't know where to start. So just being able to connect them with our partners, doulas, whatever they need, I connect them with. And then sometimes the provider that we connect them with is not always a good fit. So I do follow up with them as well to see if that is something that they need to change their provider. And then it doesn't stop here. I also follow them to after delivery just to see how delivery went, if they're in need of any other resources for their child or for themselves. So that's in a nutshell what the program consists of. I'm there from start to finish with them.
A very big nutshell. No, I mean, I think Bridges does some of the most thorough support work and wraparound services, and that's not always what our organizations value or see a need for, but to truly have someone who's a partner with you from start to finish is really needed, and y'all do an amazing job.
Thank you.
And before we switch to Q&A, I'd like for us as a panel to be able to kind of speak a little bit more to the moment so that folks feel like they know what they need to know to carry forward. Given the challenges of the current political moment and its impact on Black maternal health care, what is one thing you wish people could get curious about to build more community support? And I can start. Personally, I'd love to see folks approach Black maternal health care more holistically. So as girls and women, right, so much of the care that we experience medically is going to be filtered through our reproductive potential. And I wish we had more support, connection, and resources, not just around that, but also how do we build our village up if we want to parent, we don't want to, what are options? What does like actual support look like at those different stages? Particularly as we get older, right? The decisions I might make as a teen are different than the ones that I would make now in my early 30s. And I wish we had more conversation, more connection, more support around that. But what about you two?
Well, for me, it always comes back to my practice. I'm always thinking, how can I help to facilitate the conversation? What can I do to kind of bridge healthcare systems with the community? And so highlighting the families and giving voice to their experiences as told directly by them allows for audiences to hear, these personal testimonies, these real life human stories that are happening all around us, to our neighbors, to our family members, to people I think that is the biggest thing for me right now, bringing it back to the work. people getting curious about these very real stories happening all around them, and engaging in a way that, is helpful so that we can create some more positive change within the system. Whether that be having a conversation about this artwork to your friends, coming out to an exhibition, listening to the audio installations, the stories that I have on display, keeping the conversation going, reading the article in the Guardian, talking to your friend about, how that makes you feel. Being a part of the conversation, I think it's necessary for everybody to be engaged and to want to try to, move things forward in a positive way. So that's what I want people to kind of keep in mind, maybe get a little bit more curious about. How is this affecting the people around me? Oh, this is going on. Let me relay that to a friend, somebody I know. Maybe they don't know that it's going on. Maybe this might be something new that they've never heard about. I think the more that people listen to these stories, the more that they hear about these issues, we can all be a part of the conversation to facilitate the change.
Absolutely. So what I think people need to get curious about, I've been a part of this series. It's on Fridays, and it's a Zoom series. And it speaks on maternal health and strategic ways of what we can do to better service our birthing people. So in the first series, there was Carrie Stewart. She is a certified nurse midwife and over melanated midwives at UIC. When I heard her talk, and she had mentioned collaboration, I think that is something that we definitely need to focus on. And like I said, Ashley, when you're in your experience, how the doctor kind of shied you away from a doula, but we all need all these resources during our pregnancy. A doula, a midwife, an obstetrician, case managers. So I think we all play a part in this because, like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to get through a pregnancy. So we need all those resources. I wish I had that as well. I went through a similar experience with eclampsia, giving birth to my daughter. But it happened after I gave birth to her. My daughter was a week old, and I just had this feeling like something was wrong. So I ended up going to the emergency room, and my blood pressure was like 200 over 100. I was swollen. It was bad. So they ended up doing some CT scans and found out I had a pulmonary embolism as well, which is a blood clot that was in my lung. So I was on Coumadin for quite some time. I ended up having a seizure as well. It was a bad experience afterwards, and I nearly lost my life giving birth to my daughter. That's why this is near and dear to my heart, and making sure people know that they are educated and they know what's going on. But they told me if I did not go to the emergency room, I would not be here. So it is near and dear to my heart. And my daughter is 22 and will be 23 in March. So I'm here. I'm here, and very thankful. And like I said, collaboration. Yeah. And knowing, having all those resources available, and it's not one against the other. We all need to come together for the sake of our birthing people, and we need to stop giving birth in silence and start giving birth out loud.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all. This panel is amazing. I feel like I learn something new every time y'all speak. So thank you so much for that. We are now officially in Q&A. So if folks have questions, Laura, you can help us navigate that.
Sure.
And we will also provide some ways for you all to get involved through a QR code towards the end. But I just want to name that we have that and put it out on the front. Planned Parenthood is hosting
our third annual baby shower in partnership with the Chicago Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated on Saturday, April 18th. So there are ways to support that, and we will share that information. But I just love to put that out there before we get taken away with Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. We're going to go to questions. I want to start with Cynthia Farrell Johnson. Cynthia, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question you put in the chat?
Yes, I was asking if you're familiar with the work of Omari Maynard and the ARIA Foundation in New York. Omari has a group, it's like a support group for men who have lost partners and or children. And so I was just wondering if you all were familiar with his work and perhaps made some connections.
I am familiar with his work, but no, I have not made any connections at this point. But I think he has an Instagram profile that kind of talks about all the programs that they have for that support group, I think, if I'm recalling correctly. But yes, I am familiar with his work.
I'm not personally, but I would definitely look him up. But one organization I do know about is Dad's To-Do List, and they're based out in St. Louis. And we had the pleasure of working with them for an event where they came to talk about their program. So very briefly, Dad's To-Do List is a program that is created in collaboration with Black women who actually are trained doulas. And they create a curriculum, and Brad Edwards, who's the director of programs over at Dad's To-Do List, delivers it. And it's a cohort model where Black men come together and they learn everything about pregnancy, birth, postpartum, different ways to support, and they build community amongst each other to support each other as fathers and partners. And at the end of the program, it's, I think, probably like 6 to 12 weeks, they can actually go on to get certified as doulas. So it's something that both addresses isolation amongst fathers, community building, specifically among Black men and men of color, and it gives them a path to training so that we have more doulas for dads, which I think is fabulous.
I had no idea there was such a thing as doulas for dads. So I think that's
Dads To Do List. They're an amazing group of folks. They're part of a broader Black-owned media company that does mental health work and advocacy with Black men. So definitely look them up. They're fabulous people.
all right.
Yeah, I'm not familiar either, but I need to find out about this because I get a lot of our patients with their partners, and their partners want to be involved. So I'm definitely going to check that out.
I do have a question. My little spotlight in here. A lot of people think about I'm just going to say like a lot in general. Think about Planned Parenthood as the place that provides birth control and also abortion. Now, you're in Illinois where you have a supportive state at this point. The WCA has chapters all across the country. But I think a lot of people don't realize that Planned Parenthood also supports pregnant women, as Melissa, you have showcased here. How have those support services for pregnant women to have a healthy birth been affected by the fall of Roe versus Wade or by current things that are happening in the current administration? Have those services been affected for supportive work for pregnant women?
Well, I think we have kind of vocalized, the services that we offer, especially for prenatal care. So we've, since I've been there, we've done several tabling events that we kind of vocalize, all the services that we do. Because, like you said, we're known for just a couple of things. We do so much. And besides prenatal care, We do cervical cancer screenings. We refer out for mammograms. So there's a lot of, we have gender affirming care services as well. So there's quite a wide range of services that we do offer. So that's, our goal is to continuously go out in the community, go to these tailored events so we can spread the word as far as all the services that we offer. So we're not known just for one thing.
I absolutely agree with that. I would say one of the biggest pressures that we face is combating misinformation.
Right.
For people's assumptions that we only do one kind of service or that we're not a place that you can see across the lifespan. So I spend a lot of time telling people, well, you might not need pregnancy testing, but STI testing is helpful for everyone, right? Or we have different ways that we support gender affirming care, and that's not always hormones. Sometimes it's just social support. We do other types of health screenings that are good for people at all points. And so just making sure that, one, we're amplifying that information, telling people if there's a need that you have, we care, we want to hear it, to the point about supporting partners, right? I think there's a lot of interest in supporting folks through prostate cancer or prostate screenings, or there are just ways to be like, well, I don't want to just go for me because I don't need it anymore, but I have someone who has this thing or is experiencing that, or y'all are a place that I trust for information in this kind of way, but I need something else. So I think being receptive to what the community is telling us they need and making sure that they know we're not one-trick ponies is really helpful.
All right. Thank you. Betty, you put in your chat you wanted to build on Cynthia's question. Could you get on and just talk a little bit more about the Araya Foundation? Betty there.
Yeah, thanks so much. Beautiful presentation, such heartfelt sharing. Really appreciate what you've shared with us. What I wanted to share was that the ARIA Foundation also often collaborates with other organizations that are focused on maternal health, and they do a content-focused program across the country at least once a year. In the last 3 years, they really focused heavily on postpartum because that is the fourth trimester that has not often gotten a lot of attention and is very critical, particularly with women who have experienced complications during their pregnancy, to really have a postpartum experience that is attentive to the needs and is monitoring, is supporting the family. Because very often it's, you go home and come back in 6 weeks and there's a lot that can happen between the day of birth and 6 weeks postpartum. So they would be an interesting group to connect with because when they do those community awareness programs, they're across, people can come into those programs and participate in the events across the country. They use all kinds of art forms, applied art, fine art, performing art, music. It's a way of making the information available and getting people's attention. So that I would say, would be a great organization to reach out to and see where there might be an opportunity to gain support or add support to the work that's being done.
Thank you, Betty. Do we have any other questions? I briefly saw someone raise their hand and they took it down. Anybody? I have one comment and kind of a question for Ashley. You had this very traumatic experience, and but what I like, a lot of artists focus just on their own experience, but what I really loved about your work is how you really reached out to other people who had similar experiences and expanded the story and humanized the story for everybody. It's super powerful, and I hope you kind of continue doing this work because I think oftentimes it's, in terms of activism, it's really important that people understand the personal stories and how it affects whatever is going on is affecting people in general. But one of the things that struck me about the work is your people are always very, for the most part, separated in kind of their own space. My interpretation is everyone has really a completely different story, the husband from the wife, from the child. But could you speak to that a little bit? Why I think a lot of people might, put them all together in one big happy family, all hugging and everything. And yours they have their kind of solo experiences. I'm wondering about that a little bit.
Right. So I am thinking about the stories that they're telling. So after, conducting the interviews and listening to, like I said, I interviewed each of the partners separately so that I can get the full scope of what it is they went through and how they have interpreted it, how they reflect on it. And, so they're completely different experiences, even though they are in that situation together. And so that idea of having these different experiences, but being together, being a family, being affected by the same experience at the same time, I'm thinking about, that kind of, I guess, how do I depict that on canvas? Given this kind of smaller space to render these forms, these figures, bring out the humanity within them, create this safe space. How do I have these conversations about these experiences in this delicate way that addresses kind of this, the trauma, the adversity, the complications, but also the resilience? How do I make it inviting? So I'm thinking about it in that way. And I want, it's a pictorial device that and strategy to have the audience move through the canvas and the composition, to not only focus on one figure, but then to move to the other. How do I move their eyes so that it flows throughout the canvas and they notice maybe the building in the background, or, this textured impastoed area in the foreground, and their feet, how they're placed on the ground, this precarious, kind of chaotic, unsettling, wavering foundation that I'm trying to create and render with paint, with oil stick. How do I convey that? And so creating this movement, thinking about that. I mean, it's hard to see on the screen, but in person, you can get a feel for the texture. You almost want to go up to it and touch it. And sometimes the figures are placed on top of that texture. And so I'm thinking about that movement within the composition, that relationship that they both play, but keeping that bond and closeness preserved at the same time. But it does kind of reiterate that idea of everybody having that individual story, but coming together because it's the same story that that everybody has their own perspective on. And so, in this series, Environments of Happy Joy, bringing in the perspective of the partners, the husband, as having to bear witness of the kind of brutal physical complications that their partner had to endure, that their child has had to endure coming into the world. Having to kind of portray that in a way that is inviting to the viewer, that still tells the story, is a little bit challenging. And so I'm playing with the movement of the figures in the space in that way.
Yeah, well, very powerful paintings. Thank you. I'm going to go to Stacy. Stacy, you want to turn on your mic and ask your question? Stacy? All right, I'm going to go to Sandra Davis, has her hand raised. We'll go back to Stacy.
I wanted to say thank you so much, Ashley and team, for this presentation today. And I also wanted to applaud the scholarship behind the work and what must have gone with that work being very personal. Oftentimes we keep it to ourselves and we don't necessarily reach out to community partners to help support that narrative. And for the WCA members, know that for this year, one of our focuses is that partnership with community. So if you could just speak a little bit about how that has helped support the work and the two partners that you have sitting with you today, how important the other voices are to the body of work.
Well, thank you so much, and for all the work that you do, as well as president of the organization. Thank you so much for having us here today for the panel. I appreciate your question about community because that is a big component of my artistic practice. You know, I'm always thinking about how can my studio practice help engage the community in some way and bring light and shed light onto these individuals, these participants, I call them, into this project. And other ways that the community has helped to support the work is March of Dimes has reached out to me in the past to bring the work into their conference or space that they might have, once or twice a year for Prematurity Awareness Month. I have displayed the works and the audio installation so that audiences and community members can come and access the resources as well as see this visual, representation of these stories that are happening all around us. Another organization is my sorority Alpha Kappa Alpha, Sorority Incorporated. They have also highlighted my work within our chapter, and the Links of Chicago has highlighted my work. So there are lots of organizations within the Chicagoland area who have also reached out to help to propel the messaging that we're trying to send to not only, this immediate community, but also nationally, internationally. Everybody needs to be engaged in this conversation.
Absolutely. And I can say on our end, we met because I reached out to you over a year ago. I had found Ashley's work. One of the things that has been a priority for me at Planned Parenthood through our Black organizing program is to make sure our community engagement feels really diverse and eclectic, and we get to address different issue areas. So we have been prioritizing Black maternal health as an issue area because we advocate policy-wise for it. And with Bridges being a part of our larger team, it just made sense. So we try to do as much as we can around Black maternal health, whether that's bringing in art, if it looks like self-care events, having different conversations around mental health. So we focus our Black History Month programming around those kinds of things and our other awareness campaigns. And so reaching out to you is part of that. Like, how do we have this really important, oftentimes heavy conversation in a way that feels digestible and welcoming and creative for folks? Because I'm very weary of just kind of overloading people with sad statistics and not giving them something to move through. So part of reaching out to you was about how do we amplify the message? How do we give people education, tools to use, but also tap into different creative areas and ways of mobilizing. And thankfully, we were able to come here and support you today. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? I don't see anyone. All right. Why don't we move on to the call for action?
Okay.
Oh, wait. Stacy, you're back. Did you have a question?
Hi. Yes, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm enjoying the discussion. I'm sorry I came late. I had an unexpected package that came and I had to deal with the the Amazon people. But what I wanted to share was that I am a mom, and my son is 32. And I wanted to just stress, I'm up for my mammogram, which I hope that you ladies also plan to do, because I remember when I was a new mom and I had a cyst on my breast when my son was about 6 months old. And fortunately, it was benign. And so since then, and I was about 25 at that time. And since then, I just knew for myself when I would get information from the hospital about the importance of going for your mammogram. So I knew that for myself to do that. And I just encourage everyone, and hopefully we can get that, the word out for women to make sure screening along with everything else. So I wanted to just share that. So, and at my church as well, we have a health fair in the spring. And so I'll look forward to some future events and share the information. And so everything everyone's talking about, I'm listening, and I think it's valuable information, and I'm glad that you ladies had this today.
Thank you so much for
Thank
that.
you.
And definitely get your mammograms. Our Black organizing program supports Sister Strut, which is a 5K breast cancer walk that happens every fall. And they're really great. They do patient education. They will teach you how to do a self-breast exam, try and do those monthly, same time every month. When we table with the Chicago Southside Birth Center for their latch and stroke, they do a lot of breast education as well. Really helpful for people to know. I think another organization that does that kind of work is Know Your Limits. And they will kind of talk through just learning self-awareness. Like if there's a change in texture, color, feel to your breast, you would be the first person to know that before your medical provider. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay. One last call for questions? Anybody? All right. I think we'll move on to the call for action, and can share the screen.
So if folks feel comfortable scanning QR codes, I know people have different feelings, this will send you to a landing page to connect you with different ways to get involved. So that will take you to our invitation for the 3rd annual community baby shower, which again, Planned Parenthood is hosting that in collaboration with the Chicago Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. It is Saturday, April 18th, 2026, start at 10 a.m. More logistic information will be on that link. We are also collecting donations. So we both do a push for folks to donate through our virtual wish list, which will be part of that landing page. If you scan that QR code, we invite folks to come out, support, celebrate our Black moms and their families. It will, connect you to all the things. So please get involved. Please support that. Learn, discuss, support people doing amazing creative work, supportive work, wraparound work. And thank you.
Well, thank you.
And we have, a few more, resources that you can access from the QR code. So please take a look. And then I just wanted to also end kind of on a love note, since it's Valentine's Day. Thank you so much for joining us today. Kind of an inspirational quote. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move toward freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others, by Bell Hooks. So everybody have fun today, spread the love, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Women's Caucus for Art, for featuring this talk today, and to the panelists, thank you for joining me, Planned Parenthood of Illinois. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley, Alex, and Melissa. This has been an amazing program. And I'd just like to kind of advertise our next second Saturday program, which will be on March 14th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. It's The Art of Writing, the Art Review with Shantae Robinson, adjunct professor of writing for artists at George Mason University. And it will be an interactive workshop that will introduce artists to the basics of art reviewing so they can express their viewpoints on exhibitions, not only their own exhibition, but other people's exhibitions with confidence. So I encourage you to join us for the next second Saturday session. Shantae's a great teacher and facilitator, and she's done several programs with us before, and they've all been fantastic. So I'd like to just end this with another overall thank you for everyone coming. A round of applause. Happy Valentine's Day. I appreciate you all, and thank you, Ashley, for and everyone for all the work that went into putting this presentation together today. So it was wonderful. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you, Laura.
All right, we'll see you later. Say bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.